Yeah, right, guys. Just thought I'd say hello. I'm Jack, obviously. Fucking thanks for listening to the show and that, mate. You fucking let me know what you think of it when you're done with it. Fucking send it to a mate. Put it on your Instagram stories. It's probably one of the better ways you can share it with people. Leave a review, mate, if you're listening somewhere where you can leave a review. Otherwise, I'll let you get on with the show, mate. Yeah. Alright, guys. I'm the world around you, and this is Pause for Thought on Threshold FM. And I thought after last week and learning about Edward Wilson and how he went on to become Brother 12 because an Egyptian Ankh spoke to him and told him that he was an old pharaoh from 1300 BC, which in turns meant that he was a direct descendant, or maybe, well, no, a direct descendant, of one of the gods. So I thought it might be nice this week, while that's still fresh in all of our minds, it might be nice to look into some of the ancient Egyptian gods. So let's have a song to get us going. This is Hate Speech by R.A. the Rugged Man. Before we get into the show though, I just want to tell you that I've got some decent stuff on my website at the minute, guys. www.worldaroundyou.com. You can get a shirt. We've met Mothman from a couple of weeks ago. We had an episode about Mothman. Well, now we've got merch. There's posters and t-shirts of Mothman with his cock out. He's you know when you put a bedsheet up in your garden and aim a torch at it. You got that, but except of just getting moths, you've also got Mothman, and you can see his bell end as well through the sheet, just a silhouette. So some people are like that. I've got a fox with a cig in his mouth, and he's smoking a cig. The taxidermied fox I made a few years ago. That's on coasters, shirts, stickers. Got some Jesus lizard coaster. You can get one of them. And get your rat out, mate, on some knickers. You can get a pair of knickers for yourself or for your missus, right? And it says get your rat out on it. Also t-shirts that say get your rat out. And a colour changing mug, mate, so when it gets hot, fucking tells people to get your rat out. But anyway, we're going to get into the show. That's enough shameless plugging in the first fucking minute of the show. Well, 5 minutes. Still, fucking buy my gear. Anyway, to get into this with the Egyptian gods in that, a little reminder that the Egyptian god that Brother 12 believed he were called Osiris. And initially, with all of this, I'd planned on starting it with him, but after reading and watching videos and that, I've learned that he's simply the godfather of ancient Egypt, innit? He's not the original father of creation. He's not the big god, he's not the top god. There was a fella that was ahead of him, so we're going to start there, at the beginning. Or at least the beginning of semi-recorded history, at least. The dawning of time, the creation of earth. In Christianity, right, we're told that God split the waters to create the earth and that there was light. Now, straight away there, when you think about that with Christianity, right, and it does have bearings as well in ancient Egypt, but the idea that he split the waters and created the light. What about when you split an atom and it fucking explodes, mate? What if that's all that is? What if science there straight away is just another way to explain religion? Or religion is just a way to explain away the science? Either way, it's all the same thing, just with different words. But getting distracted already. Now, that light that was made when God created the earth, that light, at least according to the people on BitChute, the reason why that light came about was because of a god called Ra, who birthed some other beings who eventually made new gods, who in turn eventually created more new gods. But we'll get onto all that later. I've got quite a nice little narrative set out for this week. I did quite a plan for it. Now I've tried to compile a bit of a top trumps card of each god as well. So when we mention them, I'll talk about bits that I've learnt about them as well. But we are probably gonna stick to the creationist side of things of how the world came about according to the ancient Egyptians. So Ra, right? Top trumps wise, Ra would be the best card in the pack, mate. He's the boss, he's the big enchilada, the bee's knees, the hawk-headed honcho. And if it wasn't already a thing, I'd call him the honch crow, the penguin. The Macaulay Culkin of the known universe of what Macaulay Culkin was to the child superstardom, you know what I mean? Like fucking short-lived, but still spoken of to this day. And just like his child superstar counterpart, his biggest weakness of Ra was time itself, mate. Now I took it that Ra was a creature from a different place to this universe, a visitor, let's call him, from somewhere very, very far away, or from whatever the other side actually is, And it seems as though time was his prison to a degree, because it almost seemed like he couldn't leave no matter how hard he tried or whatever he did. And even when he does leave, he just ends up right back here where he started. But we'll get into that a bit later. That's near the end of the story, you know. And it kind of adds to the whole... Yeah, well, it does. It adds to the whole idea that these ethereal entities want to experience time like we do. And it looks like Ra figured out exactly how to do that. And this immediately, mate, fucking regretted it. Sorry, yeah, we'll get straight into it. I won't do the top trumps bit now, because I don't think that's going to... It's not going to make sense. It's just going to be words and names at you, innit? If I can fit them in, we'll fit them in. I'll resort back to them. But we'll have the creation story, and then we'll cover the gods on the way. Otherwise, this is just going to be like me reading a phone book, except of giving you numbers. I'll be giving you fucking years of when these gods were, you know, knocking about and that, which we don't even know anyway, because no one fucking wrote that sort of thing down. So it might have been pointless, the top trumps cards. So basically, it all started fucking ages ago, mate. Back even before the Nile was on the other side of what it's on now. Quite possibly as well before Pangaea. So that's something for the scientists listening. But it was definitely, as far as I'm aware, all of this happened with Ra and that after Atlantis had been destroyed by the floods. Now, the world as we know it wasn't the world as we know it. Instead, it was described as a swirling of water, constantly moving and changing. Now, some even say that the world didn't actually exist at this point and it was just lost to the universe. And then amongst that nothingness, a pyramid or a mound with a pyramid on it emerged out of nowhere, literally out of nothing. And that was called Ben, right? It was a massive pointed structure, and it pierced through this now, you know, pierced through nothingness. And along with that, something referred to as a lotus flower. And then from that lotus flower, we get our first deity, right? Who was called Ra. Now, when you hear this, and when I hear this, I'm thinking that these pyramids are that shape because they've pushed up through the dimensions, so they have to have a point to them to be able to pierce through. Or then you've got the other side of it, so maybe they're a part of one of those spacecraft which resemble two cubes, except one cube is inside the other, if that makes sense. Not like a big cube in a smaller cube in a big cube, in the sense that two cubes the same size, you put one flat, one normal, and then put one on its point, and then somehow you manage to fucking smash them into each other and keep it as one solid shape, so you get... You know, you got that one on its corner, and it gives you like a 16-cornered shape, I think. Well, anyway, let's imagine that all the universe, right, for whatever reason, is made up of these shapes, whatever this 16-cornered shape, and however fucking many sides. How many sides is that going to be? 16 corners, 16 times 3, 51, fucking 48, I think. 3 16s, 48. So maybe a 48-sided shape there, which is a shame it's not 42-sided shape, because it would have fitted in later on into the creationist story. So maybe it would be 42. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe, you know, they've smoothed off some of those edges of this 16-cornered shape to make it 42 sides. But anyway, let's imagine that one of those vessels, them 16-cornered vessels, let's imagine one of them broke, or machine parts, cogs, they could be cogs. Or it sped up too much, or it was slowing down, and that's what caused it to become visible in the otherwise nothingness of the known universe, right? Now, a question. If this is what we know, right, then we obviously have a record of whatever was before the emergence of the lotus flower and Ben, because who was watching this to take notes on it, right? Which is what makes me think that this happened after Atlantis. Just to try and give you a bit of context there, you know. And I'm also thinking as well with this lotus flower, I don't think it's literal, I don't think it's an actual plant. Now I can imagine that being some form of vessel, like imagine a spherical vessel, and that sphere opened up like if you was to cut up an orange peel in line with its segments, and it would just fall down. Like a lotus flower, you know, fucking unveiling Ra to the new world. And I can't help but think if this was some form of escape vessel, right? An emergency escape pod or something, maybe even an improvised emergency pod, you know, like a fucking big window or two windows held together by this fucking god. And I'm seeing it in my head as like when fucking R2-D2 and C-3PO fucking escape and crash land in the sand, you know, in Star Wars. Except when Ra escaped from wherever or whatever he escaped from, he got followed by this strong light, right? That is said to have come along when he did, which is where the light came from, like with creation, you know. Now, it doesn't make sense to me that a spacecraft would waste its battery on shining a searchlight, right, on wherever they're looking for him, until they knew where that vessel had landed, if you know what I mean. So they'd follow him on the radar, and they'd go, oh, it could go anywhere, we can't be chasing him with the light, because we'll fucking look like a fucking... It'll make it look like some form of weird fucking intergalactic sketch show, and they'd lose, you know, fucking interest in the commander. He would be going like, oh, to the left, to the right, to the left, to the right, to the left, to the right, up a bit, down a bit, up a bit, down a bit, and it'd be shit. Whereas if they'd see where it's landed on the radar, and then just fucking shine the light on there, and be like, it's fucking there, mate. Look, there it is. Fucking, luckily you missed that pyramid. We don't know whose that is. We don't want to fucking piss them off, you know. So, I think that could be where the light came from, right? And especially, you know, with everything around being darkness and that, or you know, there was this possibility of him appearing in any dimension. Maybe he wasn't escaping from a spaceship as such, but fucking piercing through dimensions, and he could have just appeared in any dimension, but for whatever reason he ended up in this one. He escaped to this one, possibly on purpose, and then they lit it up in the best way they could to try and be able to find him. Maybe that's what light is. Maybe light is actual time. Because that's weird, isn't it, to think about that? Because we can kind of measure light in time. We could also, you know, they say if you go into space and look back at Earth, you'll be able to see the dinosaurs if you go far enough away. So maybe time is light and light is time. Maybe it's the same thing. We can see it, but we see it like this for whatever reason. Just as things around us, because we've not been taught how to see all of time. Anyway, there's probably going to be one of those sorts of episodes, so fucking... I don't know, skin up, maybe. I don't know. Right. So one of the first thing that Ra did, right, when he did get to this planet, was he created himself 2 gods. And I don't know what he made them out of. It doesn't go into that. It doesn't say like he made them from the earth, or he made them from his fucking Adam's rib, or out like that. But he made some people called Shu and Tefnut, and then he sent them off into the darkness, mate. Now, initially, when I heard this and read this, I thought they were messengers, but quite possibly they were just some form of distraction so that he could ready some form of army or escape the light, you know, that had been searching for him. Maybe this was to wear down the battery of the pursuing's craft faster, you know, meaning that they'd need to turn on more spotlights to see what's going on here. How's he split up into 3 people? What's he doing? You know, and he's there with his fucking Mr. Meeseeks box, except it's a fucking Ra box. It's like fucking Ra, 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 like that, and fucking gods popping up everywhere, all made from him, just in slightly different shapes and costumes and disguises. Anyway, the idea of him making messengers, though, it seems wrong, really, because when you learn a little bit more about it all, when he didn't know where they were, he then sent a messenger out to go and find them and bring them back. But that it also implies he must have known where to send the messenger, realistically, because if he didn't know where they were, what's the point of sending a messenger? Just sending out someone else to fucking go and die in the darkness. But let's you know, he's a god, so let's say he's all-knowing, you know, omniscient, I think would be the word. Omnipotent being powerful, omniscient might be all-seeing. Even if he's all-seeing, though, he can see where they are, I guess, because he can see all of time, because time is just light. So either way, keep getting lost. Oh, this is going to be fucking hard work, this. Right. But when they came back, Tefnut and Shu, right? They came back, the messenger did manage to find them. We don't know how many messengers he sent out to the death. We don't have a clue. But let's imagine one. Let's imagine he was a fucking one hell of a messenger, right? A searcher. Less of a messenger, more of a retriever. He found them, though. He found Tefnut and Shu, and he brought them back. And Ra started crying, mate. And it was those tears, right? That's how humans were made. The first humans were made from Ra's tears. Now, before we do carry on, though, I know I keep jumping off, but I ended up down this little rabbit hole about a place called the Temple of Horus, and from that, right, I learned that there used to be a lot of the older gods depicted in stonework, right? And they'd be depicted in the same stance that Orion is depicted within his constellation. Now, if you remember back to the episode about the Greys from about maybe a month ago, you'll remember that Alpha Centauri was within the Orion star system. And if you think about the first Men in Black film as well, you know, it's all about finding this little universe in it, or the so-called key of life, or whatever the fuck they were calling it in that. And that was on Orion's belt. Now, obviously in Men in Black, it was Orion was just a cat, it wasn't the star system. But in ancient Egypt, though, you got to remember that cats were highly regarded, right? And even thought to be literal gods by the name of Bastet, which I thought was a nice bit, a nice little thing to learn there. So, anyway, we'll get back into it a little bit more. So, a lot of these gods in ancient Egypt, with me saying cats and not the cat gods, they weren't literal cats, they were like anthropomorphic cats and anthropomorphic animals, and a lot of them, though, were actually half human, or sometimes even like 3/4 human, and then the features of an animal, which seems an awful lot like genetic manipulation. Cats, hawks, fucking jackals, lions, crocodiles, hippos, even at one point. All animals, right, that in some way or other were associated with Egyptian gods, and quite possibly, right, alien-produced animal-human hybrids. Now, I can't find anything anywhere that suggests otherwise and suggesting that they weren't these things. So the animals associated with them, right, as well, you got to remember there, if you remember the angels episode, right, fucking, what did we have? We had cats in the sense of lions. Hawks were associated with them. Crocodiles in the sense of the lizardy bits. Bird wings and humans as well, they're obviously a part of that, right? All associated with angels, specifically mostly the cherubim, or fucking cherubim. And the cherubim will also get involved in this a little bit later on as well, but I've not really told you much here. I've just been sort of rattling off. So let's have a song, and we'll properly get into it. We'll pick up from where we got to. This is Lifesaver by Verb T, Ill Informed, and the Four Owls. Alright, mate, just a quick little advert for myself. If you're enjoying this, fucking join the Patreon, mate, if you can. For a little as a quid, 2 quid, 3 quid, tenner, whatever you want to throw on there, you get the same stuff either way. Obviously, it's nicer if you put like 3 quid on rather than a quid, because I'll only get like 75p out the quid, but still it's 75p more than what I'm getting now. It's just you get access to video versions of these, discounts for canvases and maybe some other little bits off my website, and you get access to the PDF versions, that's the digital download versions of my books. Anyway, I'll let you get back onto your show. If you're enjoying this, right, do you know what you might like? You might like a fucking bollock boy, mate, which is a little robot with mouse testicles in. 6 quid on worldaroundyou.com. There's other stuff as well, like mystery boxes and fucking things I've made out of rats and dead ducklings and that, so fucking give them a look, mate. The prices start at like fucking a quid for a piece of fossilised shell. And then prices vary going up. You can also get shirts and that as well from there. But go and have a look, mate, worldaroundyou.com. But I'm guessing if you've found this, you already know about all the taxidermy. But still, maybe now's the time to treat your missus to a little mouse heart. I don't know you, though. I can't tell you what to do. I'm just glad you're listening to the shows. I'll fucking let you crack on. I just wanted to mention a couple more things about the animals I did, and then we will get back into it. Like the fact that hippos and crocodiles are included in those animals, right? That is something that I find quite interesting, because if you was to have used animals to describe something, you could easily, in the sense of they were like a crocodile, they were like a hippo. You know what I mean? Not like to say they were fat and that, but like colour, texture-wise and stuff, you could easily say that a reptilian alien is crocodilic. The grey aliens, anyway, the greys, they were kind of hippo-coloured. They're kind of grey. But getting back into the ancient Egypt creationism story and how the world came about. So we've got Ra's come out of the lotus next to Ben. The lights appeared. He sent off Shu and Tefnut. Shu and Tefnut have now come back with the messenger, the unnamed messenger. And he's had a cry. He's had a bit of a strike in the corner, because he's dead happy to have him back. He's given him a hug. The tears have fell. The tears have produced the first humans. So that's where we're up to. Now, those beings that Ra made, as I said, Shu and Tefnut, they were very specific gods, which I've assumed means that they had superpowers. Because why else would they be that? Shu was the god of air, which is a shame, because it would have been nice if Shu was the god of ground. But he's the god of air, so maybe, could be, because I know we've got Nike, and Nike was a Greek god, or a Roman god, a Greek god, I think. Well, a god either way. And then you've got Nike Air Max, and air is Shu. The whole thing's a Shu, so it all links together, guys. There's fucking links everywhere. You just got to look at the world, right, the right way. And Tefnut was the goddess of rain. And as you'd imagine, right, these powerful beings, they weren't really ones for rules, right? Ra had to tell them not to be fucking having it off with each other whilst they were out and about and that, but there was a bit of a fingering behind the galactic bins, and it must have gotten a bit, hot and heavy, a bit out of hand, and Shu ended up firing out a couple. No, Shu wouldn't. Shu was the man. Shu ended up firing a couple up of Tefnut, and no, who was the man? Who was the woman? One was a god, wasn't one? Was a goddess. Tefnut was the goddess. Fucking Shu fired one up at Tefnut. Tefnut popped a few out, right? Let's fucking get it right. We want a little bit of science in this. We don't want to be muddying the waters. We don't want to confuse you. Now, whilst Tefnut was pregnant, and maybe 9 months later, maybe longer, maybe instantly, I don't know the gestation period of a high-level deity. Mary was 9 months, but she was a human, so makes sense. Maybe it takes whatever the mother is. So a lotus flower crashing through a dimensional plane later, Shu popped out a couple of kids, despite Ra telling him not to. And that just goes to show, really, that God's got no place in the bedroom, mate. God's got no place in the world telling you what you can and can't do with your holes on your body. So that's a nice little tidbit to take away from this week's show, if you take anything away from this. And from what I read as well, like, Ra probably didn't want them having it away, because he might not have liked to be touched, because he wasn't making kids the conventional way. Well, maybe we all make them the unconventional way, and he's watching us from above as he goes past on his fucking sunboat every sort of 18 hours, and he's looking at us going, fucking idiots. What are they doing? Why don't they just do it like this? And then he's just fucking throwing gods down at the earth, Now, he made them out of nothing, but kind of in a way like Adam and Eve, they were made out of but we, at least, like I said earlier on, we got the description, they were made out of the dirt and the rib. But coincidentally, though, Adam and Eve were also cast out of the Garden of Eden. And in a way, I guess you could argue that these pair, Shu and Tefnut, were initially cast out from Ra's light into the wilderness of the universe, or maybe even into the fucking further cosmos, which, for those of you wondering, is the word for the space outside of the universe, which I thought was a nice word. I enjoyed learning that bit. Now, this pair of children that were spawned were called Geb and Nut. Now, Geb was the god of earth, whilst Nut was the goddess of the sky. And some time passes now in the story, and in that time Ra becomes king of the universe. Now that's the story I want to read, to be honest. I want to learn how Ra becomes king of the universe, but he becomes the one true leader of everything that exists, but not beyond the universe, not the cosmos, just the universe, right? And then he returns to Egypt, which seems fucking bizarre. And after all of this, I've started to really think that Egypt is allegorical for Earth, I think, because even in Zachariah Sitchin stuff, I'm sure he says that Egypt was just the name that they were given to Spaceport 1, which was just Earth, but it was also called Egypt. But we'll stick with it being Egypt for the sake of this being about ancient Egypt. And then when he came back to Egypt, he gifted some sacred animals in the way of ox, hawks, lions, the animals that would basically make up the cherubim in the angel law for Christianity and various other religions. So you could look at this in a way of him coming here and adding aliens, maybe making a zoo for himself, or adding some form of alternate dimensional beings to the earth or to this universe or plane of existence. Maybe they were his family, possibly, maybe his pets, like I say, a zoo. Could have been his friends. He was trying to look after the kids of his friends that had died in battle, or maybe just some form of responsibility that he'd ended up with whilst travelling and conquering the universe. Another way that he gifted Egypt was to give it the Nile River. Now, using science, it's very easy to understand why the river was a blessing. If that land was as desert as it is back then as it is now, then the water would have been a literal godsend, mate. And it was, it was apparently it was a good thing for the area. Now, and that might be where the phrase godsend comes from. It could be to do with the Nile River being given by Ra. So just as a little, and that river would have brought water to the area, but also carried that water away. Which could have given us the phrase, what God giveth, God taketh away. Just as a little, we like a bit of etymology on here, don't we? And anyway, it's unclear because I haven't actually read Ra's space logs because I couldn't find them or any form of record of anything like that. But either way, on his possibly on his way back to Earth, or when he was back at Earth, or maybe it could have been the reason for his return. I'm not sure, but he had a vision anyway. A lot like Edward Wilson had, but instead of telling Ra that he was the pharaoh from the past, it told him that his great-grandchildren would become the new gods. And that came to be. That became a thing that happened, which is mental. Now, I might be wrong here, but he tried to ban his grandchildren from having children, or at least from having it off with each other to try and limit the amount of gods being made. But a lot like with the mum and dad, fucking incest ran in the family, mate. And instead of creating a bunch of children like the ones I used to see in that front garden by the bus stop as a kid, back in where I grew up, or for those of you listening, more like the family from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, they actually gave birth to fucking one hell of a powerful family, right? The Kennedys, if you like, of the ancient Egyptian gods. The ones that everyone remembers, everyone talks about, and the ones that all try to kill each other. And you've also got the conspiracy of all of them, you know, within them all, because one of them disappeared and maybe they came back a long time later. But that's for a political conspiracy theorist. I don't like the confusing stuff. I try to stay away from all that. I don't get it. So the great grandchildren of Ra were Gi and Nut, right? They had a litter of inbred deities with you don't know, fucking no shortness of powers, mate. They were fucking... One of them was Edward Wilson in his original form, Osiris. Then we had Isis, we had Set, and Neph, which would be basically Set is spelt Seth, and Neph is spelt Nephti. So if I might get these pronunciations wrong, fucking that's who I'm talking about. Now, from what I can tell, they're all related to each other, but as is tradition, Osiris and Isis paired up, and Set then became the equivalent of Scar from The Lion King, and Nephti was a sort of cuckoo, I guess. Instead of like laying her eggs in another woman's nest, though, she just disguised herself as Isis and got impregnated by Osiris. So she just lay in the nest and waited, I guess. Now, I know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking here. You're thinking shapeshifters. And I thought that as well. But I'm not sure if it is that difficult, in all honesty, to trick someone who's the result of about 3 generations of inbreeding, to be honest with you. In a way, I also think they're all just Ra anyway, but that was never really explained. But I think they are just Ra incarnated, but they're all still alive all at once and forever, constantly, all talking to each other. Anyway, part of this vision that Ra had seemed to make him think that his great-grandchildren would then dethrone him, which again did happen. Osiris became the leader of the world and fucking king of the universe, and it might have been self-fulfilling prophecy, but even if it wasn't, and it was down to Osiris's hard work and determination, it was still kind of self-fulfilling prophecy because Osiris is Ra. So maybe there's a link somewhere there, self-fulfilling prophecy, and a way to try and explain away psychology, because famous psychologists throughout time seem to have been, well, in the 1900s, 20th century, you know, they were obsessed with ancient Egypt, like Freud, for example. You know, I've been to the Freud Museum. He had some ancient Egyptian stuff in his house. He fucking loved it, mate. So he must have got some stuff from there. Now, Set, what he really wanted, he wanted the role that Osiris had, mate. That's what he wanted. And even though all of these deities are basically Ra, they're still different people to one another, which makes it all seem a little bit far-fetched. But Set was a fucking angry guy, mate. And he seemed to genuinely fucking despise Osiris, right? And Osiris's kingdom was Egypt. And, you know, Osiris was a man of the people, you know. He gave the people gifts. He gifted them with civilization so they could step out of the primeval ways and a window, mate. See who's coming. Don't have to fucking attack everyone, every noise you hear, you know. He gave him that, which, you know, I've taken primeval meaning hunting and gathering, and which is just as well, you know, that Osiris decided to then give them permanent buildings and advances in technology, because by this time I would imagine that the gift that Ra brought of fucking crocodiles, lions and hawks, they must be fucking running rampant now through these primitive camps, fucking killing off most of the people. All that Nile really did was a place for all these apex predators to sort of meet up and pick off the locals and the fucking ox. Anyway, that's another thing that makes me think these creatures have to be allegorical of some sort of, maybe a type of different species of humanoid creature kind of thing. Because I'd argue, even by today's standards of technology, right? If you think about it, the gift of a lion, an ox, or even a regular cow, a crocodile, or a hawk, mate. Just one of each of them, or any of them, just one of them. Even just one. Even just, like, I'd be grateful for a hawk, yeah. But it's still kind of a dickhead gift, innit? It's not really a thought-out, considerate gift. So to dump a load of them on people who hadn't even existed long enough to know what the fuck was happening to them just seems fucking cruel. And I don't think Osiris would have had to work very hard to be better than Ra in most people's eyes, mate. It seems like if you had a manager at work, right, who was a bit rapey, let's say, a bit gropey, right, and then they leave, they no longer work there, you know, and then you get one who works there, who's above you, and every now and then they just offer to make a cup of tea when they're using the kettle. It's a fucking huge improvement, innit, from your point of view, but in the grand scheme of things, they haven't really made the effort to be a good leader. And I think it's just that. Honestly, I think that's the difference between Osiris and Ra. I think Ra got a fair bit wrong, and then Osiris didn't really do anything. If that, you know, he went off, became leader of the universe, which is something he kind of inherited from Ra, who's just him anyway. Anyway, one of the other things that Osiris gifted his people was the skill of weaving. So basically fences, he gave them fences, which was a way to contain the ox, you know. He's just tidying up after Ra. The fences, I imagine the fences would probably keep them a little bit safer from lions as well. It's a good way to transport the hawks without them flying away. And maybe weaving might have also been good for boats, I'm not sure. So, you know, that's now a way to get across the Nile to the long-lost family you haven't seen for generations, because Ra put a big fucking river in the way and filled it with fucking angry crocodiles and hippos. And, you know, the boat would give you possibly a way to survive the crocodile-infested water. Maybe not survive, but at least, you know, drastically increase your chances of survival. Now, I did mention the Lion King briefly before, and I haven't actually put my Lion King synopsis out on Threshold because it wasn't anywhere near long enough. But a lot of the story of Osiris seems to be a little bit like the Lion King, and actually Star Wars as well. Now that I think about it as well, there's little bits of it that are a bit, especially as we get later on, it gets a bit Star Warsy. Now, Osiris gave his people the gift of agriculture as well, which probably came with the weaving and the, you know, building fences. Oh, you've got fences now, so now you can keep the ox there. This is called farming. And that ties him in, though, with the ancient American beliefs of Quetzalcoatl, which we bring up quite a lot on this show, along with other bits as well to do with ancient America, like pyramids, the tall stature of Osiris, you know, how big he was, and as well, I've not really mentioned this yet, but it is in my notes a lot, and I never get a chance to really bring it up or explain it. But there's a group of people, like the 7 builders, the 7 sages, and that seems to crop up everywhere, you know. And the last thing I've made a note of that Osiris gifted to his humans was the ability to bake bread, which was actually something that would be looked down upon until the early 1900s, until an English family by the name of Warburtons would set the next technological benchmark for the world. Now, Osiris's breadwinners were sort of besieged on all sides around Egypt in the barren vastness which was Set's kingdom, which is something else that makes me think that Egypt in ancient Egyptian lore means the planet as a whole, because it's hard to believe that there would be a whole civilization surrounded by sand and nothingness and that they'd be sort of trapped by it. It seems a bit bizarre, because I mean, whilst being completely self-contained, I know, like, I mean, you could say that about an island as well, I guess, and we're an island and we're self-contained in that regard, but we've got access to the outside world, but we're in modern times, not in ancient times, and I know that, and from my understanding, a lot of people seem to believe, though, that this area of Egypt, that this all focuses on, if you like, the story, especially in regards to what I've mentioned before about the Temple of Horus. That was an island. This part of Egypt was just an island surrounded by the Nile. So maybe the Nile was a way to then protect this island, and that's why the Nile was such a good gift. Possibly, I'm not sure, but it's making sense now in my head as I'm going through my notes here, but I'm not sure. Anyway, there's also, I remember there was also the idea that all of this was an island and was surrounded by waters, like in the start of the story when we said, you know, the pyramid came up through the nothingness, through the waters and the moving waters. But where did all that water go, mate? Like, that's always been my question with creationism, and that And with the flood stories, I'll have an episode on all the different flood stories as well soon. I'm compiling notes on that as well. But that water's got to have gone somewhere on it. I mean, yes, it evaporates, right, and it freezes water, but it freezes at the fucking ice caps, mate, and they're the furthest bits away from the centre of the earth. So as the world spins, it forces the water upwards, quite possibly, and it gets cold there, and then it freezes, right? But I kind of imagine the poles as being somehow uphill from wherever you stood as well, because of the curvature of the earth. So it's got to be the centrifugal force of the earth actually spinning, dragging the water up there. Anyway, if it evaporated away though, if the water just evaporated and disappeared, then why did it do that? And what was the air before that happened as well? Was the air just non-existent until Shu and Nut started making the air in the sky? Or were they already in control of it somehow? Speaking of which, right, when they say that they were the god of the sky and god of the sea or god of the air, do you envision that they had superpowers affiliated with those words, right? Or that they were just in charge of some form of armed forces that specialised in those fields? Because I sort of bounce between the two. Anyway, let's have a song. This is Daylight by Aesop Rock. So, Set wasn't a goth or an emo or even a mosher or out like that, innit? He wasn't keen on being king of the darkness, and that gives more power to the idea itself of the never-ending battle throughout all of time of light versus dark, which I understand now that could easily be an artistic way to interpret days becoming night and night becoming day, and I would imagine that night times back then were fucking terrifying because, before the invention of streetlights especially, and in Egypt with all these fucking crocodiles knocking about, hissing all over the place. I was initially thinking Set could have been in charge of the underworld, but it doesn't seem to be the case, innit? Like, the underworld seems to be a very different thing to this darkness surrounding Egypt. I think the underworld, or the netherworld, or hell, or the one-held hell in Nordic lore is a completely different dimension entirely. Anyway, carrying on with where we left the ancient Egyptian gods, where they came from. I think I was about to tell you about Osiris making a woman out of his sister, but not the sister he was supposed to be shagging, which could be a problem that has been facing royals even in the modern age, where they can lose power and privileges for marrying outside of the family. Anyway, Nephte, or Neph, amongst family and friends, the sister that wasn't his wife, so Nephte was the sister that wasn't Isis, pretended to be Isis and went far enough that Osiris was able to chuck a handful of puzzle pieces in a box, if you like, trying to keep it polite. I don't want to be fucking vulgar and that. And these puzzle pieces made up a puzzle that at this point, this puzzle must have been made entirely out of fucking corner pieces. And the picture on Nephthe's box may have been a misprint, right? And these corner pieces would really come into their own for making up the jagged edges of the child's face, because that kid would be born and would bring up questions, quite a few questions amongst the family. And now I bet you're all slowly but surely understanding why all that time ago I did an episode called Dog Botherers about people that shag dogs all those weeks ago. Now, Nephthe's and Osiris's illegitimate child became the god of the dead, the 7/8 human, 1/8 jackal-headed human hybrid known as Anubis. Easily, hands down, one of the most recognisable of the Egyptian gods, I think. Everyone knows Anubis, everyone's heard of Anubis, everyone knows Anubis looks like a fella with a dog's head, right? I mean, some gold on and that, And that helps to answer the question we were all trying to work out at the minute, is well, I've always been trying to work it out, so I don't know if you must have been as well. And that question is, how inbred is the family in Chainsaw Massacre? Now, if we apply the same logic, right, and realise that Leatherface is easily the most recognisable in the lineage of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre family, and then we recognise that Anubis is the most recognisable in the line of Ra's family, then I put it to you, dear listener, that the Texan family in that film were approximately 4 generations into their inbreeding. Anyway, it all seemed to annoy Set more, this, because not just the inbreeding, though. I mean, I think he was actually annoyed because I think Nephthys was his piece, even though that was also his sister. So one nice thing about all of this, though, where there is a little nice silver lining, is that genetically Anubis is the same genetics as he would be if he was actually the child of Osiris and Isis, and I think him and Isis had a really good relationship, which is nice. It's nice. Very, very nice. It's not the kid's fault, She's stayed with him. They've kept the kid. Somehow a different woman has managed to keep another woman's child, which throws it in the air a bit. But I mean, Osiris was Lord of the Universe. He could probably do whatever he wanted. While Set was pissed off, and he decided to do the age-old trick of, I'll invite them over to be civil. Except Set didn't do it to be civil, and he told Osiris that this was a party that was in his honour. And Osiris, clearly a bit daft, quite possibly from all the inbreeding that had been going on, wasn't as astute in intellect as Set, or at least, completely oblivious to his scheming. Now at the party, Set told everybody there that he'd made a coffin. Well, not he hadn't made it, he'd had a coffin made, but it doesn't fit him. So wherever it fits best, he's going to get to keep it, because he doesn't need a coffin that doesn't fit in. And to me, that's immediately suspicious, mate. If a coffin's too big for you, realistically, it's not a big deal. You just make sure you die in a chariot crash with someone that you like, and you've saved a bit of money then on the coffin. And the old digging, you can both be bundled in together in all your different various pieces. Yeah, maybe you'll need a few more pallbearers, but that's usually people that have volunteered, you don't pay for them. And in a tragic chariot crash, back in the day where loved ones died together, people would be fucking chomping at the bits to be a part of that, mate. Especially like there's the fucking God of the Darkness, the King of the Darkness, and brother of the King of the Universe. Everyone's going to want to carry that coffin, so it seems a bit suspicious. Plus, also, if the coffin was a bit small, again, chop him up. He's dead. What the fuck does it matter? Cut him up into small, manageable pieces. Bundle him in the box. We could probably all save money on coffins if we just all started chopping each other up and putting us into boxes. Them boxes could be 3/4 half the size. Maybe they'd be a bit more difficult to carry, but you can just shove a pole down the side of it, or underneath it, or a couple of them fucking scaffolding planks or something. Carry it down. Dead easy. Yeah, these are gods, and I'm here solving their issues. But then again, saying that about the pallbearers, though, this was all before social media, wasn't it? So maybe back then people were less inclined to do nice things because they wouldn't be able to tell people that they'd done a nice thing. Now, after a few rounds of "What's in the box?", it was Osiris's turn, and much like the Disney villain that he's set out to be in this story, Set bundled the lid shut as soon as Osiris got in there, and he sealed him in there immediately, right? He ended the party there, and then everyone there must have been actors fucking from the world stage, maybe, if we remember that. They're all fucking life actors, fucking... And then he drags the box, the coffin, and the box now becomes a proper coffin. So it's interesting as well now to learn that not all coffins at the time were made of stone, just the ones that have lasted to now. I mean, maybe Set was big into his weaving at the time, because that seemed to have been a big thing then. These people seem to really hold it in high regard because they gave it as a gift to the humans. So maybe he was big into his weaving, and I presume it was in these last moments of Osiris's life, after he'd been thrown into the... Sorry, I didn't tell you, he'd been thrown into the Nile by Set at this point, and he'd been chucked in there and left to drown. And it must have been at these last few moments of Osiris's life that Osiris then decided to jump through time and meet countless heirs to his mangled genetics all throughout time, predominantly in the last 150 years, and tell them that they're all connected to him, like Edward Wilson. Now, after enough time had passed for Osiris to drown or to suffocate in this box, if it is a stone box, he's probably suffocated rather than drowned. If it's a woven box, I imagine he drowned. Set pulled the coffin out of the Nile and chopped up Osiris into 42 pieces, 42 being the number that I think was the meaning of life in the Monty Python film, The Meaning of Life. And this is quite possibly why. This could be where the Pythons got it from, I'm not sure. Anyway, Set then went about the place around Egypt, as we're told, scattering them around to prepare his what would we call it? We'd call it an unorthodox orienteering course for his nephew and his sister slash sister-in-law. So Isis and Anubis, right? They got about all around Egypt together, maybe alone, maybe had a few side quests here and there, you know. And they went and found all 42 pieces, and they managed to get him onto a table. All of these pieces of Osiris, they lined him up perfectly, and then using what I imagine must have been some form of magic, maybe some form of alien technology, they managed to Darth Vader Osiris. But instead of creating a cyborg, they made the ancient version, and Osiris became the world's first mummy, living, breathing mummy. Then Anubis handed his role to his father, because obviously he imagined that obviously Osiris now looks the part, now to be Lord of the Underworld and the Lord of the Dead, you know. Whereas Anubis just looked like a man with a dog for a head. Not really, kind of sinister, yeah, but not as sinister as the fucking king of the universe that's now become an immortalised mummy, you know, and the first of his kind as well to come back from the dead with the stitching still visible. So kind of nice, you know, that Anubis handed the role over to him, and it's the good bit of the afterlife. They don't really have a hell as such. It doesn't seem. They have the good afterlife, and you know, they don't really have the bad life, because the bad afterlife, because instead of having the bad afterlife, Anubis instead, I think it's Anubis, just takes your heart, which represents your soul, and feeds it to Amet, which is a half lion, half crocodile hybrid, which I can only assume was made by Ra. Anyway, then it gets very modern, though. It does get very modern here. So Isis has a child with Osiris at this point. You've got to figure out. Meet a new child, right? Now their actual child, meaning that the god Horus, which is the child that was made from this, had two mummies for parents, which is it's very modern. And Horus is usually interpreted as their equivalent to Hercules, Jesus, you know, is the son of God, if you like, within that. Even though Anubis was the son of God, Horus is the son of God, if you like. He is their Jesus, which I'm guessing as well is because he very much resembled Ra, his possibly great grandparent. Just like how Jesus, you know, was the son of God and was God in human form, Horus was also mostly a man, hawk-headed hybrid with some superpowers, just like Ra, compared to his originally quite plain dad, Osiris, which just looked like a bloke that had been kind of stretched a little bit. Horus decided that he wanted to take his rightful place as leader of the universe, and then he set out to kill Set. Weirdly though, Ra quite liked Set, even though Set is often depicted as evil and conniving. Set would eventually be forced to serve alongside Ra as he would pass through the underworld, but again with that we're getting quite ahead of ourselves. Horus and Set would fight endlessly for about 80 years, and at one point the fight became a simple game of shapeshifter one-upmanship, and the two became hippos to see who could sit underwater for the longest time. But during this, Horus was planning to use this as an excuse to kill Set, but Isis refused to stab a sleeping hippo, which was Set, so his plan fell apart. Now, instead of being proud of his mother's honour to not stab her brother in the back while he was sleeping as a hippo under the water, Horus actually decided to then decapitate Isis instead, which seems a bit much. But now, I mentioned Freud before, and Freud might say he did this to try and fuck the neck hole, but I couldn't find anything about that anywhere. But I do remember, as I said, Freud had a lot of interest in ancient Egypt, so let's not rule anything out here. It could have been so he could shag the neck hole. Anyway, Toth came around, and now this is where he comes into the story, and Toth was having none of this, mate. He didn't want to see Horus shag the neck hole of his dead mother. He didn't want that at all. Now, Toth was the god of knowledge. He hasn't had a mention yet. He was the god of knowledge and wisdom. And if you have got the time, go onto YouTube and have a listen to the Emerald Tablets of Toth. They're very good. They're really worth a listen, because it seems to literally tie all of the ancient gods of Egypt in with Enki, Enlil, and the Anunnaki as well. So that's pretty cool. Anyway, Toth decided to turn his mum into a cherubim and popped an ox head on her in order to bring her back to life. Now, it was at this point where the court of gods sat Set and Horus down and said, look boys, fucking pack it in now. Fucking people are dying. This is enough now. You've gone far enough. So in order to apologise, Set tried to pull out his old party trick, which might be where we get the term party trick. Except instead of getting Horus into a box, because obviously that would be too obvious to have Horus die inside his own bird box, Set tried to abuse Horus, which I think, I think that might mean molest. I'm not sure. I could be wrong, and I'm very happy to be wrong. Let me know if you think that Set sexually abused his nephew Horus in the live chat. Let me know what you think. Now, it could have just been a quick peck. It could have been that Horus was egging him on. We may never know. Unless, we're visited by ourselves, by an Ankh in the future and told the message. Anyway, Horus was having fucking none of it, mate, and he snuck off to the kitchen to spread his divine seed on some lettuce and had his cow-headed mother feed it to Set. And Set was then poisoned by what I think was his nephew's cum. At least I think it was his nephew on papyrus, but in reality, genetically, they're all the same DNA as each other, I think. Not that makes it any better. I'd actually argue it's much worse to be secretly fed your own semen than to be secretly fed someone else's. Only in the sense that it's better to be punched in the arm than punched in the ribs. Also, how do you harvest cum from someone without them knowing and then feed it to them? I'm open, to be honest, that I've been fully aware of every time that I've had my divine seed harvested. I might not remember them all right now, but I reckon I was aware of them at least at the time. I'd hope, anyway. The cum-covered lettuce killed his uncle after an 80-year-long battle. It was a wet lettuce that ruined the party, which again could be where we get the phrase from. And the ancient Egyptians, you got to remember, they are actually responsible for a lot of our modern world. So it makes sense that a lot of our terms of phrase and idioms would actually come from there as well. And now we're getting towards the end of Egyptian creationism. It starts to tie itself together in the weirdest of knots. The fella that died from his nephew's ejaculate is taken under Ra's wing and forced to accompany him on his daily visits to the underworld. He's forced to protect Ra against the serpent of the underworld known as Apophis, a huge fucking cobra snake-like creature that seems hell-bent on stopping the light from leaving the dark in order to allow his own darkness to spread. Possibly to destroy the light created by Ra. Maybe Apophis is responsible for the batteries in this spacecraft that's searching for Ra with the spotlight, which is our sun. Who knows? Maybe the natural order is darkness, and Ra hasn't actually escaped the prison ship at all, or a different dimension. Instead, he's just tried to break off on his own and make a new dimension, which, coincidentally, using Egyptian stuff, would class as the 13th plane. Which is weird again, because 12 and 13 seems to be tied into everything, and I am slowly starting to think that I could be just in some form of coma, and this is all my brain trying to show me something to do with the number 12 maybe, because 12 comes into this because before Ra and Set face Apophis the snake, they have to then pass through 12 gates of the underworld, and one of them includes the afterlife, where Ra and Set have been meeting with Osiris every day, which Set must fucking hate me. Osiris at this point now being the mummy and being Lord of the Underworld. Meaning that, after this fight with Apophis, I imagine to keep him in there, there's another gate which then allows the sun and Ra and the golden boat with Set on it to get back into the real world that we know, meaning that would be the 13th gate they've passed through. And on that boat, right, on that sun boat as well, it's worth mentioning, there's the sun on this is actually just a golden disc, which seems to be everywhere in ancient Egyptian lore when you start reading about it. And I didn't find out what it actually was. I think it just means the sun. But weirdly though, one of those golden discs was also inside Set himself, and when he died, the disc ejected from Set, and Toth was really quick to grab that disc, and then he rammed it into his own head, which is mental, really. So I don't know what Toth's got planned for the future, but he's obviously, one to look out for in the future, fucking when we get to modern Egyptians, or futuristic Egyptians. We've had ancient Egyptians, we've got modern Egyptians. The next one is future Egyptians, the return of the Toth. He's got to be coming back, he's with his golden Blu-ray. He's going to kick off, I would imagine. But then again, he likes knowledge, and if that's what this disc is, was his brain or information, and he's like, oh, fucking have that, mate. And now he understands anger and stuff. Maybe he can now use anger to his advantage. I don't know. I can't quite remember the Emerald Tablets of Toth off the top of my head, because it's hours and hours of stories. But it's worth a look on YouTube. Now, the world as we know it now, this is where it kind of starts now. At this point, after Set and Ra have defeated Apophis a few times, because at this point the new gods were born. They would each live to pass on their genetics to all the pharaohs of Egypt, starting with Amun Ra and Atum Ra. They used the syllable of Ra to indicate their genetic affiliation with Ra. But though also around this time, it's said that the Greeks were stirring in the area, starting to invade and that. So these pharaohs quite possibly could have been fake pharaohs and were just using these names to try and seem relevant to the people that they were trying to control. It's something we don't know, but we might cover next week in ancient Greece and their gods. And that's it from me for this week. Later tonight, Jimmy Budd's on at 7 with Jim'll Mix It. And tomorrow, the pair of us will be back again with Truth Seeking at 7 p.m. As I said at the start of the show, I've got some new merch out on my website, like a dead fox having a cig, knickers that say get your rat out, and shirts with Mothman with his cock out on him. Fucking go and have a look, guys. I'll fucking see yous in a bit, mate.
Thanks for listening, man. If you enjoyed the show, you should probably go and try Truth Seeking. That's TROOF Seeking, as in like SEEKING, not like a fucking type of helicopter. But it's me and Jimmy Budd, a comedian from the UK, from England, like me. Don't know why I'm saying it like that. Either way, though, go and fucking have a listen. You can find one or two in the feed for this. There's the Crop Duster, but there should be by the point you're listening to this, at least 15 episodes going out for Truth Seeking. So you might enjoy that, mate, and fucking leave a review on here and that. Leave a comment if you've watched it on YouTube. And if you do have YouTube as well, you can actually watch some of these. You can have them playing on a loop with my cartoon playing on a loop whilst you listen to 4 or 5 episodes of it. So, maybe throw that on at night time or something. Because that might help as well, because that might mean I can eventually monetize my YouTube. Anyway, fucking thanks for listening, man. I'll see you in a bit.